Hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you, Dr. Hayes, for giving me this space. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Lillian Hartmann. I'm Senior Professorial Lecturer at AU. It's in the City Teaching Alliance site in Dallas. I've had the honor to serving with the CTA, formerly Urban Teachers, for the last 7.5 years. I was with Hopkins before and joined AU in June of 2023. And prior to doing that, as old as I am, I have worked in master's programs in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, K through 12 schools, teaching and coaching, and has also been involved in math, RTI programs, and an ESL curriculum. So yeah, I've done a variety, and I love the position where I am right now, because I feel like this is the best place to be to connect university and school together. So before I get started, I'm hoping for discussion. I do have my script because I'm the type that wanders, and all of my friends who know me out there know that I definitely ramble at times. So in order to respect your time and go through the study orderly, I have my script, and I'm going to share my screen, and yeah, and I'll start. Okay. So let me see if I can move this over and slideshow. Okay. So I wonder what works better. Okay. So the title's there. Also, it shows the terminology. We considered it at the time, it was ESL. Let me get off of these. Thank you for being patient, folks. It was ESL to support ELL, English language learners. And now in the state of Texas, and I'm assuming it's nationwide, we're changing our name at times to English learners or to emergent bilingual. And so for this case, I'll be referring to them as ESL, and because we named it ESL seminars and also English language learners in our classroom. So Dr. Courtney Bauer, who was also in our program previously, and myself, often discuss the lack of knowledge of our students demonstrating regarding methodology or strategies that were appropriate for the varying language proficiency levels of the ELLs in their classroom, because they're out of the 4 domains. The students struggled with 1, 2, or more of them, and also the lack of knowledge of these levels that were involved. Moreover, we also noticed that students who struggled to express themselves in English were becoming quieter and speaking less as they advanced in the secondary grades. Our program at the time, this was under JHU, offered ESL seminars with the intent of preparing pre-service teachers, or residents, as we refer to them, in the knowledge and understanding of second language acquisition and in research-based classroom strategies. But we were not experiencing their or seeing their demonstration of this understanding in their lesson plans or how they were working with the students in their class. Therefore, we decided to examine the concerns that pre-service teachers had while taking the seminars and the implication of using these in host teachers' classrooms. We're not looking at what they learned in the seminars. We wanted to examine the concerns they had while taking these seminars and the feelings and perceptions they had at attempting or seeing them or using them within their host teacher classrooms. So the seminars consisted of 4, and they defined the types of programs offered for ESL students, such as traditional bilingual, dual language, and the policies that surrounded them. There were also best practices for teaching, except for vocabulary, some introduction to the sheltered observation protocol, or methods that focused on supporting through increasing proficiency levels. However, despite the fact that districts, and ours as well, our program at teacher prep programs provide pre-service teachers with valuable innovations, right? We put new curriculum in front of them, we put district screeners in front of them, new types of books to use Teachers often don't implement what they've learned. Spillane in his work discusses the zone of enactment, which may be a central factor with implementation. He states that teachers' own knowledge and the innovation must match or reconcile and connect to the new practice or knowledge in order for a teacher to use the innovation. And in our case, it's English language for the English second, ESL strategies that they were learning from the webinars, or the seminars. If there's a mismatch, a disjunction emerges that can create anxiety or concerns for the teacher. Therefore, it behooves teacher trainers to understand when and why teachers experience any mismatch or concerns during and after professional development training. So on that premise, we conducted the study. We wanted to understand the concerns that the teachers had, or these residents had, about what they were learning as they were being taught the ESL seminars, and if these were being effective in giving pre-service teachers the tools and information to better support their ELL students in their classrooms as they moved into teacher of record. The research questions. What are the stages of concern teachers have regarding the use of strategies for English learners at the beginning, middle, and end of the series of ESL seminars on best practices? And what aspects of the ESL seminars best support or do not support pre-service teachers' knowledge and use? So the first research question was, the data was collected through a survey, and the second one was collected through interviews. So I'm going to, this slide shows you the methodology. The methodology, quantitative and qualitative, is using the concerns-based adoption model from Hall and Horde. There are 3 instruments available: the 35 statement stages of concern questionnaire, which we refer to as survey, the 3-legged interviews, and the innovation configuration map. We chose to use the stages of concern questionnaire and the interviews. Now, this survey classifies feelings and perceptions in the change process that individuals go through when they are confronted with something new in their work-related situation, some type of innovation, a new requirement. And this survey classifies those into these concerns into phases or stages of how the individual interacts with the change. And in this case, the study was using ESL strategies in host teacher classrooms. The 3 sources of interaction fall under self, which has 3 stages, task, and impact. Task has 1 stage, impact has 3 stages as well. And you're going to see the table of these stages in a moment. We use the online stages of concern questionnaire, the survey, which contains the 35 statements, and we created the statements for our innovation, which was the ESL webinars, or seminars, excuse me, with a 7-point Likert scale from 0 to 1, indicating how true the statement was to the individual at that moment in time. And then we followed up with brief interviews, which also would help us glean more information from their individual responses. And these were done after the 2nd and the 3rd survey. So this model, concerns-based adoption model, is housed at the American Institutes for Research. It's online. So here is the first the first phase that an individual goes through: the unconcerned, which is more concerned about things at this time, different things. They had little concern involvement with the ESL strategies. So when individuals are first confronted with something new, a new curriculum, at first they think, oh, I've got so many things going on and I'm not really concerned about this yet. And the second phase is informational. Knowledge is limited to general information, but there is an interest. If this is a high concern, there is an interest in the fundamental aspects of ESL. There's a fundamental interest in gaining more information. And the second part, the 3rd stage here, which is, it's labeled 2, it's personal. And how does this change your teaching or in this instruction affect my professional status? The person is uncertain about the demands of implementing ESL strategies, its inadequacies, and then what are the repercussions when they don't? So when a stage is high, the concern is high. The next phase is task, which is falls. There's one, the phase is task, and it's one stage management. This is time and organization. How do they manage this new thing, new requirement, this new innovation, this new curriculum? How do they coordinate the task? Is the focus of attention. And in this case, referring to ours, it's issues related to the logistics of using ESL strategies are of utmost concern at this stage. So when this management is high, we know they are working and that the concerns are high. It's an indication that they're at a point in learning that they're ready to be concerned about the management. How am I going to fit this in? Third phase is impact, and that's consequence, collaboration, and refocusing. There's 3 stages here. The consequence, how's it affecting students? Attention is focused on the impact to students, the relevance to students. And how do we, is it improving the student performance and student outcomes? How are they approaching it, attending to it? Collaboration, the focus on cooperation and coordination with other teachers, their peers, or refocusing, revising and modifying. So when they're at a refocusing stage, they've already been through the process of getting the information, managing the time. When this refocusing is high, this individual is ready to really dive in and see, is this the best thing that can be used at this time? We've got it down pat, we've modified, we've adapted. Is this the best that we need at this time? Or should we be looking for more effective tools for our students? Okay, this is a sample. As I said, it's 35 statements, and these are 2 sample statements that I pulled from the area under informational. And as you see, it's the statements very true or me, somewhat true, not at all, or it's irrelevant. And this gives you an idea of how they could respond anonymously since they were coded. Each student was coded. And regarding the statement of concern or the question. And so we received these, we could pull our surveys through AIR, through the components there that we were given. We could pull our surveys, and we were able then to see where their responses fell. So the study context. There were 25 pre-service teachers participated in the study. They were coded according to specific demographics. And some example would be grade levels or types of classrooms and district. Interview questions were given over the phone after the 2nd and 3rd survey to allow participants to expand on their responses more in depth. So we did this individually, we split them up. And all but 2 were able, I think we only had 2 students who we were not able to reach on one of the surveys, but other than that, we were able to contact all of them and follow up with the interview questions. And I'll show you some samples of the interview questions in a few moments. But first, our combined report. This is what we received as a combined report of all 3 of the surveys. We also received them individually, and we also received them under the demographic data that we had put in. So in the questionnaire, the high percentages indicate the concern is where the feelings are at this time. So stage 0, remember, was unconcerned. And in survey 1, you see it at a 91 overall for all participants. So unconcerned, this is not something they needed to think about or worry about right now. And you look at the first 2, the 2 highest, and then you look also at the low percentile peaks. So the raw data indicated that our concerns of our residents remained high in the stage of unconcerned, where they were interested in other things than the ELL strategies and seminars. But there was a movement towards the informational stage. So you see by survey 3, they were already on 75% here. So there was more of a movement by May that informational was indicating interest in acquiring more knowledge. The lowest percentile peaks were over 3 data points were found in stage 4, which is the stage 4 was the consequence. Remember, was impact, consequence, collaboration, and refocusing. And stage 4 is consequence. This indicates pre-service teachers had less concern about the impact of consequence of using or not using. So that goes along with being high and unconcerned, that the lowest is going to be, the consequence is going to be less of concern as well. There were some minor differences in the categories of the subdata, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but I am going to show you this. So I'll give you a moment to look at it, and if you see where the peaks are, how they change, this were the districts, the 3 districts from our students, and then Gen Ed, bilingual, and ESL. And noticing that with ESL, where here it left the unconcerned stage and moved into informational stage as a peak. When you look in April, and also here, District C also had a difference of a change, a peak here. The unconcerned and informational remained for the subgroups, highest 2 stages for District A and B, but District C, the second highest stage in January and April, was personal. A high score in the personal stage, 2, indicates there's more concern about the effect of this on a personal position or job security as opposed to gaining more information. In reviewing the data for District B, with regards to unconcerned, the movement indicates a lesser concern of other things with regards to self and an increased concern for the learning of the ESL strategies. So it continued, those are for the districts, continued here in January as well. The next subgroup, in particular, it was a particular interest to us, was the type of classrooms that the pre-surface teachers were positioned in the study. So if you look at table 4, 5, and 6, was not labeled, but these below, and the responses. The highest concerns for all 3 subgroups in January were still stage 0, except for the ESL. In January, ESL, their highest stage was in information in January. I don't feel like it's necessary to go through all of this, but if you see this, are there any questions you want to ask?
Yes, Lily, I have a question. I
Yes.
wonder, without knowing more about the categories, unconcerned or consequences, do you think being a resident teacher may have dropped the scores since they may feel they can't have as much impact since it's not their own classroom?
Absolutely, Gail. And that's what we heard also in the interviews when we interviewed them separately, that they were taking these ESL seminars during their residency year, but they felt like they had less autonomy to try to actually, to ask questions, to rehearse, because they had less influence on what they could do in the host teacher classroom. Thank you. Very good question. So these were two of our questions. What was your greatest obstacle struggling in the ESL, or struggle in using the ESL classrooms in the instruction? There was also most of the respondents that were interviewed were concerned about the lack of training. It was the information and practical strategies, and then collaboration with host teachers. Absolutely, Gail, you're right. That was one of they felt was the greatest struggle. It's not that they weren't interested. That was just for them a difficulty. And then what you consider positive in using these, and they definitely, all of them overwhelmingly said the differentiation of instructional strategy to include practices that align to their needs, and also to be able to do different engagement protocols that are aligned to their proficiency domains when they're gaining new content. There's not one point before I move on to this. The surveys from the phone, the pre-service teachers were uninterested at the onset of the seminars as the months progressed. They stated that theoretically they were understanding the language acquisition and methods, that might help them, which that did help them to a certain extent, but there were not enough practical strategies that they could actually practice. All but 2 teachers had ELLs in their classrooms, and they stated that their host teachers were not aware of language proficiencies levels of their students, and that most of the host teachers, is a response we received from our students, were that the host teachers were guessing mostly by what the students could say out loud in class. This was concerning to our residents because, being residents in our program, they know how critical the identity, the culture, the language community is for our students. and for not being able to know exactly how they could help them in specific proficiency levels and support them was concerning to them. So when we think about at the end, the conclusion was overall that what we found, what we gleaned from this study was that there was information available there in the ESL seminars, and students were going to all of them, all 4, but they felt like the information was not targeting exactly what they could actually learn and hang on to in order to move into once they left host teacher classrooms, because they didn't have that environment to begin to talk, to practice, to actually do and implement things they were learning. They felt it was very high theoretically and less practice-based. And they saw it as valuable, but they felt it was lacking to support them once they left the host teacher's classroom and then moved into teacher of record. So in thinking of next steps or thinking of further examination, which we had planned on, but then COVID showed up and we didn't get any further. The recommendation would be to revise the actual seminars so that we could practice and rehearse with residents, and to help them to gather that practice and information in order to grow holistically, that the interest, the understanding is there as they move into being classroom teachers themselves. Important was also to revise them that they could understand how to break down the TELPAS, the tests that were being given for proficiency levels, to understand the ELPS fully and how that looks as connected to the Texas standards. There were several things that we felt could be enhanced in order to make it more clinically based for the teachers, for the residents. The ESL seminars were discontinued 2 years later. Currently in our courses, there is a minimal discussion or information on how to support students whose second language is English. And I know in the courses I'm teaching, we have less over the years. I know that's a gap, and that's why I'm happy today that we're together, and hopefully we can have discussion. I think a deeper dive, we have preparation workshops definitely to help our teachers to pass the ESL certification. It's required in Texas. And I'm definite they take something away from those preparation classes, not just to pass, but also that they take away important understandings about supporting second language learners. But I feel like as instructor of a course and a coach, I could be more active and could be more targeted in supporting my students and helping them to understand proficiency levels, looking at practices that are research-based that support those proficiency levels. What does that look like in your lesson in this unit we're planning? What does that look like in your lesson for your diverse learners? I think that's something that I feel that's something that's not present, that's missing. And it was also brought up to me this summer by 2 of our students in the new cohort. One was in math in the secondary, the other was in ELA secondary. And the ELA secondary said, I'm Latina, I'm Hispanic, and I'm not seeing or hearing anything about second language strategies this summer in the courses. And I explained to her that the summer courses were base courses and we were going to increase as we moved along. And she later told me, she said, we have students in our class who are not speaking, but she's in 10th grade, or is not speaking, but really they know the information. They're just hesitant to open their mouths. And we're not quite sure of the level of proficiency that they have to be able to express themselves. Isolated cases. But however, a deeper dive into what we as instructors and coaches can do to build the knowledge and understanding in the repertoire of strategies our teachers need to elevate our second language learners is necessary while valuing and honoring their first language. It is so in education. Often we get to the how to do it before addressing self-concerns. We want to focus on student learning before teachers are comfortable with the materials and strategies. The kind and content of professional development opportunities can be informed by ongoing monitoring of the concerns of students. And then we could address it. Our hope was to continue the study the following year, but as I said, COVID interrupted us, to be able to run the study one more time as teacher of record, and then as coaches, to get our coaches on board to intervene when those concerns were at a high, which makes it, then we become change agents within that environment. Okay, so that pretty much closes me out. And if I continue to, if I continue to speak, I'll start wondering. So are there any questions? I would love a discussion.
I just want to say, Lillian, thank you so much for that. I thought that was fantastic. For someone who is not in that space, I really appreciated being forced to think about, how does my work with school leaders impact what you're talking about? And for me, one of the things that immediately came up is whether or not you all found that your pre-service teachers were experiencing incoherence, curricular incoherence, particularly I think in District A. And did that have an impact on the extent to which they thought that they could engage in the work that you were talking about? Because what I find is that leaders have a really difficult time trying to create coherence, especially when you start talking about students who are in ESL programming at their school, or even some of the SPED classrooms in their schools. So I just wondered, how did that play out, and what implications does it have for what leaders need to do differently?
I find that the leaders, and I've worked with some of the admin teams, well, I did for 3 years in the Dallas area. I find that for them to focus on the TELPAS results and actually move those forward to the teachers and help them understand proficiency levels of students. On the secondary level, there was less of a desire, simply because it took time and they had other things, right? The other things that were more pressing, those scores that are those content areas that are being tested. Proficiency levels are not being tested by the state. So was not as pressing. Not that they weren't interested, but they left it more to the PD from the teachers, right, that they were having. And their PD was often limited to the CALPS and BICS, right, from Cummins and then on a secondary level to the ESL teachers for newcomers, students coming into, or the ESL teachers that had a small group of students in their class. We found the students from elementary, first grade through sixth grade, or first grade through fifth grade, they had an opportunity for traditional bilingual or dual language. Traditional bilingual was focusing more on English and less on Spanish, where the dual language was more Spanish and English. And so the understanding of where the proficiency levels were seemed to be more of a concern, because the teachers were more, because they were younger, they were just starting, they were able to acquire the language quicker as they are as adolescents, right? So I don't want to say that the admin were not, the principals that I worked with, are not interested. I think the priority level was not high enough.
No, I agree with you. I often think it's not that there is a lack of interest or willingness. It is that they don't have time, or they don't know how to bring that coherence into play and bring their people, all of their staff members along in that space. So I appreciate you on that. Questions? This is great.
Well, I taught the ESL seminars years ago for a couple of years to the residents. My perception was that it was too much too soon, and they couldn't carry out these strategies in the classroom because it was a different world. It's great to talk about it in coursework, and we've got time to be innovative and creative, but then that didn't transfer to the classroom because there was no time. We've got the scripted lesson and we've got to do this, and we're barely getting that done. So that was my perception, is they weren't coming back with these great stories about how it turned out. And my other question is, The ELL strategies and special education go hand in hand. And I'm hearing from teachers that I don't really think this child needs to be in special education because I think it's a language barrier. Do you have any thoughts on, should we be testing children more in their native language to ensure they're not misidentified as having a disability?
That's a good point. Very good question. When I was teaching in the elementary, I taught later in middle school, elementary, there was a wave where there were, the schools were putting students who were not speaking English in special ed because if we can get them into special ed, they didn't have to be tested, right? With that No Child Left Behind. That was a disaster. And as far as trying to understand their coherent, their comprehension, what they could understand and what they could learn. Personally, and I wouldn't have any say on this, but I think diagnostic testing should be in Spanish as well. They have the SPED diagnostic testing. I think it should be in Spanish as well.
I think it is. I think we are required by law to test for the initial evaluation in their native language. But I was speaking more to iReady and map testing. All of that is not in their native language. And I think it's skewing the results.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm wondering if, since it's not in Spanish, since it's more up to the teachers or the teacher prep programs or the professional development to help to assist the teachers and support them by giving them regular PDs and following up on that in coaching on proficiency levels. How do you identify the proficiency levels? What does the TELPAS look like? What is TEA giving us with strategies for these that are research-based for these students who are on a speaking as a beginner or speaking as an intermediate? Or I don't think we do enough of a deep dive on that. And because again, it's not that the want is not there, the desire is there to do that or to see that because there is a concern for kids. But I think I just feel like we have ESL people in our curriculum working, but I think that the understanding is there, but I'm not seeing it trickle down into our teachers. I'm really not, I can be honest, and into our classrooms. I was just in a classroom a couple of days ago, and it was sixth grade, and the sixth grade teacher was teaching in Spanish and English. And there was a young girl, thank you, Emily. It was a young girl sitting at a table, and she was quiet the entire time, even though they're working in groups. And I spoke with the a resident later. I said, well, this one child did not speak up at all. And I said, so I think it would be good if it's probably, maybe it's a language, maybe she didn't understand the content. Since you are Spanish speaking, to get with her, to pull her to the side, work with her individual to find out. And then he said, nope, she's the top student in the class. She just doesn't want to open her mouth because sometimes when she says things, other students laugh. And he said, and I said, well, you need to help her to grow over that. You need to set some norms when people speak in a class. This is sixth grade. And but I've seen there are teachers and students come back and tell me that there's some of their students, they are bright and brilliant, but we don't know where they're not able to use their voice to discuss. And we don't want just written. That's not the point of our program. Our program is also to elevate their voice, to help them learn how to talk and discuss. And I think that's a miss for us when we don't do that. We can produce on the test, but not, for their discussion, that's what's failing. And I see that for a lot of kids anyway. And I don't know if I answered your question, Gail. That wasn't part of my script, so I probably got off totally, me. But I do appreciate it because it used to, my background was Arabic and English, and my Arabic was subtracted when I was small because the fear, if you didn't know English, you can't get into be good in school. And so all the relatives spoke it, wrote it, read it, and we weren't taught. So somehow along the line, and my identity, which Dr. Flake so beautifully spoke about when I heard her recently, my identity, that is a part of me that propels me to be concerned about, and as a focus of any work I do, of students or people who have second languages, and are not being able to learn the native language properly and also retain their second language. Same thing with our languages of community, right? That not that they shouldn't, we want to uplift those as well, right? As long as our target English, but no, I'm way off track.
That's a whole nother well, that's a whole nother presentation for you. Because I think about the native culture, I'm Osage, and this idea of turning and talking is foreign to us. You would typically talk with purpose. And so talking for talking's sake is not especially valued. So I'd love to see your next seminar on the cultural diversity of that we can promote in our classrooms.
I appreciate that. I'll have to start typing up my papers now. My script. Does anyone else have thank you so much, Gail. I
I
appreciate it.
think
Anyone?
Emily has a question that she put in the chat box. Emily, do you want to talk more about your question?
Oh, she doesn't have a
She doesn't have a mic. So she, in her chat box, she says, she's curious to hear some more about some of the ELL strategies, especially ones where there is some more pushback from teachers. Are there certain misconceptions that you see about ELL teaching in classrooms that we as teacher educators can work to address?
Okay, thank you, Emily. I appreciate, I don't know much ELL learning. Okay. There are a series of PSYOP strategies, the sheltered protocol methods that has been used in the past. I have to be honest, I was trained on that 20 years ago, and I'm sure has become better since then. But I feel like that the strategies that we're using now, where teachers feel, or host teachers, I see veteran teachers see, is often what they're using with ELLs is some type of a visual, right? Where they're using graphic organizers. They're using realia with students who are very small, who are not understanding. They use real objects, right? But I don't see, what I'm not seeing is understanding of what level of proficiency, right? Where in the language domains where where students are in the classroom. I think we have to be more targeted to understand the student individually on the proficiency levels before we talk about what strategy would be best for them in specific content area. I don't know if that helps. I'm not knowledgeable enough about that, and I think that's why I'd like our conversations to go. How do we become more knowledgeable on understanding proficiency levels of our ELLs and how that translates into best practices according to that proficiency, right? And within a specific content, be it math or English or social studies, one of our sciences, that we're able to understand better, or we're able to guide, facilitate, and help our teachers to know, to recognize the strategy, the proficiency levels, and then what practices are best for students on those levels in order to elevate to the next level. We have beginners for this young girl. Written, she's on intermediate level or advanced level. But then speaking, she's on a low level. She doesn't trust herself. She pronounces things incorrectly. She can write them, but she has trouble pronouncing. So her speaking proficiency is on a different level as her writing proficiency. And I think that we have to make ourselves smart. What did Emily say now? I've got to read it in the chat. Wait, Emily. To get folks away from one size fit all approach and using diagnostics. Exactly, Emily. I agree. Because right now I see that everyone uses the same thing. When I ask them about special ed or ask them about second language learners, it's going to be a graphic organizer or an audio book or a visual on the screen. But I think and that all of them have that. And whatever strategies, I know in the past with PSYOP strategies, they're very basic towards encouraging discussion, speaking and listening. and then the writing and the reading. I know as a second language learner, when I learned German, the speaking was easy, conversation. The reading was easier for me too. And then eventually, the listening, when I listened to people, I could pick up what they say, or at least not a lot. But the actual writing was the hardest piece for me. And I think with the writing, if they're advanced writers, they definitely can improve their speaking more on a different, if they're not speaking much at all, or they're hesitant because of peers. There's a whole effective thing working there as well for kids who speak different language as second language. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm hoping that we go into the mindset that we need to think about this gap. I mean, to find some ways to work towards professional development for us first as instructors and coaches to fill the gap that we have with this. Because I know I have gaps in this area. That's why I'm putting it out there and hoping to have other like-minded people come together eventually so we could work on it. And then from there, we can support our teachers. Thank you for your questions. What do y'all think about the CBAM model? Okay, this is my question. What do you think about as far as monitoring, gathering data on teacher concerns as opposed to teacher output?
I like it. I like seeing that data, especially since I taught ESL seminars. I think I would also like the input of the professors who taught that to kind of reconcile, here's what I did, but here was the outcome. So that, yeah, it was nice to see that data. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we need more training. There's been debate about whether or not to teach in the native language alongside English. And I'm a proponent of teaching in as many languages as you know, but there's been some pushback about that in that, well, they speak Spanish at home, so they should be speaking English in the classroom. But I'm not a fan of that philosophy, but that's kind of, I would be interested to know how you feel about that.
Well, I see that in my middle school. Middle school, they're no longer in bilingual classes. Some of our highest dropouts are middle school. That's why they say, oh, it's gotten better, our graduation rate, because big groups drops out in the middle school, 7th and 8th grade. Some of those are service industry, some of the highest in the application. I know this from my son-in-law who worked for the Anatole Hotel for a while, just in looking at resumes. The most that came in where their highest form of education was 7th, 8th grade, and they dropped out, and mostly from the Latina community. And it was for the middle school and high school. And I've seen this before when I've gone in to observe, even in classes that are considered, a teacher who's speaking also Spanish with them. I suggest that the kids to do it in Spanish and English. They have students that stand up and respond in Spanish. I say, okay, then let someone else repeat what they said in English. Let's hear it in English, and then let's go on and continue with the conversation, just to give them the practice and a safe space to express themselves in Spanish and in English. In the lower grades, we have our bilingual and our dual language, and the traditional bilingual. And the traditional bilingual, yeah, we have questions about that as well, because it varies so dramatically from one district to another. And when kids come into 6th grade, when I was working in the districts in the past, 10 years ago, one of our largest concerns was that kids coming in the 6th grade from bilingual classes were not ready to come into the English classroom, but that's all they had. They had to start English in 6th grade. It was no longer a bilingual class for them. So I think using the language, their language, if you're able to, as a Spanish speaker, I think is excellent. But to balance it, to always push them gently, to hold up their language, but to also let them speak it in English as well. I had one in 8th grade that did a beautiful job over at Medrano. She had them split back and forth, and they would help one another in English and in Spanish. Grows both literacy, right? The literacy in both language. Yeah, great idea, Gail. Gail, you're going to be on this committee with me. or this group. Definitely.
Lily, I have a question, or just maybe one, the role of self-efficacy. And I know that you guys like wanted to pick up the study and didn't continue it, but I'm curious as to the role of self-efficacy around implementing ESL or ELL practices or PSYOP strategies. If they didn't build that self-efficacy during their residency year, how likely were they to even try in the following or subsequent years to even pick up the ELL practice, or did they just feel defeated as if they didn't get it during their foundational period in their teaching? Because I know when I started teaching, that was the first thing that my principal introduced us, but I had to go to PSYOP training, and so because I did that my first year as a teacher, I was more likely to seek out those trainings and seek out the support because I desired to do it because I understood the benefit of it then. And so I'm thinking from a programmatic standpoint, like what can we do that even if they are not covering this content wise in coursework, we know they have to take the ESL test, but what can we do on our team building that self-efficacy, building that interest around deepening and developing those practices, whether it's required of you or not, because this is what our students need. I hope that was not too much.
No, Alexis, I agree with you totally. I've thought about that as well, because the idea was just to go into if we were to do a second round, was then to have the coaches actually address those concerns. And then if the information was a problem, what do we do to help them to understand more, to gain more information on ESL strategies? But I think for us as a program, it's more fundamental that we have to, as a group, come together, and maybe it's a small group. It doesn't, I would be open in order to, to dive, that's like the PSYOP strategies, to start there. And I know Professor Souza is very much aware of those, to actually come together and to train ourselves as coaches, what these are, train ourselves on TELPAS. What does that look like from these results from the state that shows proficiency levels of our students? What are the different types of ELs? How are they categorized, and where are their levels? How are their levels moving, and what are the expectations that we can support in helping them to grow? What are the practices that they need? I agree with you. They didn't feel, would not have felt, ready to do it in their own classroom, right? And now we see our teachers don't feel fully ready either. When you talk about ELPs, many of them are still surprised that is something they should be including in their lessons. I think for us as a faculty, we need to come together in a small group of us, all of us, need to do PD on it. I really do. On PSYOP, on understanding the state's TELPAS, and understanding proficiency levels. We should dig ourselves into the nuances that so far until we're so comfortable that we can work with our students in a PD, but also in our courses. When I start talking to them about BICS and CALPS now at this point, I got to go back and explain about commons and explain about, it's a whole different dive that I would take away from my course content. But I feel like if we could figure it out as a group ahead of time and prepare ourselves in a PD with PSYOP strategies, with understanding second language learning, how that is in language 1, language 2, and then also to understand practices and their proficiency levels and practices that align to that, I think we could do it. I'm convinced. It'll take a while, but we could do it. And I think then if we were to do a survey like this again, when they have a specific concern, we could act and help them because we're knowledgeable in that area. It would be like with Eureka or with Amplify, or Wit and Wisdom, other curriculum that we're using. If we're well enough trained in it and understand it fully, and which we're working on it. And then when they have concerns over the year, learning about this and doing, and either in their self-concerns or in their management or in their collaboration, then we can intervene as a coach and be a change agent to help them at that point in time, instead of waiting till the end of the year when it didn't show well on the scores. Isn't that what we usually do? We introduce something new. I tell my students all the time, it's a pendulum. At the end of the year, the scores are poor from the universal screener, so throw it out. Teachers never knew how to use it, never knew how to pull profiles from the map and really dig into what it was. Didn't know how to pull all in learning the profiles and actually use those for differentiation in small groups. So we toss it out. Let's not use it anymore. Let's get a new one in. So we look at the product instead of the process and the concerns that are appearing over the process. I hope that answered, Alexis. You know me, I'm so wordy.
No, that answered all of my questions. And you know, the other thing when you said we look at the product and not the process, I think I want to add another P into that, the people, because we get so focused on the student and the families. And if they would just do more of this at home and the students would come to me with this, that we don't even take time to unpack that the product is not working.
Right.
It's not the people. It's not, you know, so, but I appreciate all that. And you have my wheels spinning right now with ideas.
Love that.
I want to add on to that. When you were talking about presenting it in faculty meetings first, I think that goes hand in hand with special ed, is how do you tweak this lesson to address the needs of children with specific learning needs. I think we could bring in ELPs, bring in ELL training, and then bring in special ed training with a real practical application for math and ELA. I would love to see that.
I agree, Gail. And I think that's also with special ed. We have teachers that they're writing down graphic organizer, or they're writing down, and I said, well, what level? What do you know about their IEPs? I don't know.
Lily,
Go with the graphic organizer.
I have a picture of organizers all over the floor after testing, and I show it to the students. I'm like, this is not a solution. For a student with disabilities, they throw them on the floor after the test.
Right, exactly. But as you said, it's important for us as professors and as coaches to understand fully and then know the steps we can take in order not to overwhelm students, but to be very clear and targeted in how we support them, and teach them what is it, help them fill in that gap. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Lillian. This was great. I want to thank everyone for coming out today and sharing this time with us. And Lillian, I want to thank you especially for your presentation. As someone, as I said earlier, who works with school leaders, this is really impactful, right? I think about, as you were talking about process, where they need to show up in the process so that they can begin creating different conditions for the work that you're outlining and the work that the residents are learning to do can actually get done, right? Because that's half the battle, right? How do I create the culture and conditions for success?
Yes.
So this has implications, I think, not just for the work that you're doing, but I think it has work for what we're doing collectively across SOE. And I just really thank you for sharing it. It was really impactful and very enlightening. So thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, all of you, for listening and being here. I appreciate y'all. And now I can put away all of my papers. You have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye.